Good morning. My name is Kelly McNeil, and I serve as the Director of Congregational Life here at First Unitarian Universalist Church of Columbus. On this day and every day, we acknowledge that we are on land that Native Americans inhabited for thousands of years before white people came. In central and southern Ohio, the Adena and Hopewell peoples built mounds, traversed, and enjoyed life as early as 3000 BCE. I invite you to center yourself into this moment as we listen to our prelude. Good morning again. As I said, my name is Kelly McNeil, and I serve as the Director of Congregational Life here at First UU. Welcome. We are so glad that you are with us this morning. If you are visiting with us, thank you for checking us out. Please let us know that you are here by filling out the visitors form on our website. You can find a link to that in the chat box. I have a few announcements this morning. Please join us after this service for a virtual town hall. This is taking the place of our weekly coffee hour, although we encourage you to bring your coffee along to the town hall. If you are interested in learning more about us or are ready to join First UU, please attend our next Pathways to Membership class next week. You will need to register to get the Zoom information. You can find the link to register in the chat box. To learn more about our programs for children and youth, please email our Director of Religious Exploration, Amber Scott. And if you would like to know more about these announcements or anything else First UU, please send me an email. Now, this morning, we are so thrilled that First UU member Kristen Figg will be speaking about a cultural history of witches. A native of Northeast Ohio, Dr. Kristen Figg is Professor Emerita from Kent State University, where she taught English, French, and medieval studies, and served as Associate Dean of the Salem campus. She is currently a lecturer at the Center for Medieval and Renaissance Studies at Ohio State, where she has taught the history of the English language, Gothic Paris, and magic and witchcraft in the Middle Ages and Renaissance. Kristen lives in Clintonville with her husband, John Friedman, a medievalist with whom she has happily co-authored 4 books, and enjoys cooking, music, fly fishing, and playing with her grandson in her spare time. We are certainly in good hands this morning. I now invite you to grab your chalice as Don Jones leads us in our chalice lighting.
Good morning. My name is Don Jones, and I serve on your board as Vice Chair. On behalf of myself, my husband Andrew, and our children Harper and Ajax, I bid you welcome and greetings. We are less than a week away from the festival the Celts called Samhain, that the Christian Church observed as All Hallows Eve, and we today call Halloween. If you have a chalice or a candle at home, I invite you to light it as we kindle the flame together. We light the chalice with these words by Andrew Pukula, Afraid of the Dark. In sightless night, terror draws near. nameless fears of talon and tooth. Hopelessness yawns before us an abyss, alone and unknown in the gloom, longing for the dawn. O sacred flame, blaze forth, wisdom brought to life. Guide us with the light of hope, the warmth of love, the beacon of purpose and meaning. Because we are all afraid of the dark, let there be light. Our chalice is lit.
I invite you now to sing our opening hymn, Make Channels for the Streams of Love.
Good morning. I'm Amber Scott, your Director of Religious Exploration. Our Sunday school class for 7 to 12-year-olds and the Stargazers group from our Navigators Scouting Troop both meet online later today. Check the chat box for more information. Today's story is called A Very Brave Witch by Alison Mcgee and Harry Bliss. You are not going to believe this, but poof! I'm a witch. My favorite holiday? Well, what do you think? That's right, Halloween. I love the decorations. And I especially love the costumes. You might not believe this, but most witches are afraid of humans. Did she say humans? Why? Because, well, humans aren't green like us. I'm not afraid, though. I've done my research. Here are the facts. Strange but true. Most humans are afraid to fly. Most humans do not wear pointy hats. Humans are rarely known to cackle. Ha 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 ha. Nothing too bad, except, you know, the green thing. It's time for this brave witch to take a closer look. Hang on, kitty, we're going in. Listen, what's that I hear those humans saying? Trick a tree? No one can trick a tree like me. Vroom! Swoop! Zoom! Yikes! Are you okay? Sweet costume. A real human. That was quite a spill. I'm being touched by a human hand. I've always dreamed of flying. Flying? Have I got a treat for you? Hop on. Some witches, the very brave ones, are not afraid of humans. And some humans, the very brave ones, are not afraid to fly. Happy Halloween! The end. In this story, a young witch does her research, faces the fears of her elders, and decides to meet real live human beings. It's true, it can be really hard to meet challenging topics and conversations head on. The scary stuff is still scary, even if you are brave. But yes, we can do these things, even when it is scary, because we are strong and we are courageous. As we move through the spooky part of the year, may we all do great things by leaning into our discomfort, believing in science, and choosing love over fear. I can't wait to hear about all the ways that you are brave.
Thank you, Amber. I'm Isabel Call, your Assistant Minister of Pastoral Care. I really like how this story reminds us that our fears are not always borne out, and our stereotypes are often just wrong. Perhaps today you need to be seen and heard as you really are. Later in our service, I will be reading your joys and sorrows. If you'd like me to lift up your words in this shared community, I invite you to use the chat box to type your full name and, in 10 words or less, the sorrow or joy you wish to share. Then select Send to Panelists, and feel free to give me some pronunciation tips. In the future, you are welcome to submit a request ahead of time in our website under Connections. This is also a place to ask us to get in touch with you for pastoral care, or request a caring card, or get support from our caring network. You might also be interested in joining our UU Cares network, which connects people in the congregation who want to have regular phone calls to keep up your spirits during these strange times. If so, reach out to Bob Mills, whose contact info should be in the chat. I invite you now to join in singing Break Not the Circle.
Break not the circle of enabling love, where people grow forgiven and forgiving. Break not the circle, make it wider still, till it includes embraces of the living. Come wonder at this love that comes to life, where words of freedom are with humor spoken, and people keep no score of wrong and guilt, but without human bonds remain unbroken. Join then the movement of the love that frees, till people love whatever race or nation, will truly be themselves, stand on their feet, see eye to eye with laughter and elation.
Good morning. So, in the children's story, we saw the modern, fun version of witches as make-believe characters with a well-recognized costume and special powers. But where did our idea of the typical witch as a female with a pointy hat and broomstick really come from? And what does the image of witches in Western culture have to say to us about our current atmosphere of fear and anger, or even our current problems with the power of the internet? To answer these questions, I'm going to start with a survey of what a witch was imagined to be in the ancient world and work our way through the Middle Ages to the Renaissance, where the interest in witches really explodes and we get our pointy hats and broomsticks. Starting in ancient Greece, we find that the image of a witch is surprisingly alluring. The stories of Circe and Medea, for example, are tales of beautiful women with extraordinary powers. The first able to change men into swine, and the second an expert in herbs and natural substances who uses her skills first to aid her husband and then to take horrible vengeance on him when he is unfaithful. In this medieval image of a story from around the 8th century BCE, we see that Circe is not a hag, but an attractive, dignified woman. And on this piece of ancient pottery, we see that Medea is beautiful and graceful, even as she is committing murder. In fact, both women are not mere witchy mortals, but descendants of the gods, so they are not the isolated crones of later times. The main thing they have in common with later witches is that they represent the fears of men who lose control in the presence of powerful females. These witches are, in a sense, agents of truth, showing men their weaknesses and flaws, and they are not in the service of an evil power. When Medea needs to escape from Corinth, her grandfather, the sun god Helios, provides her with a flying chariot, suggesting that she is part of a higher plan and not just your ordinary witch that you might meet on a dark night. Stories from the Old Testament are not about the power of women, but rather raise important questions about whom sorcerers serve. In the biblical book of Exodus, when Moses confronts the Pharaoh, for example, we would generally assume that we are seeing miracles rather than witchcraft, plagues, frogs, partings of the seas, things that God alone would initiate for his chosen people. But the story of Aaron and the snakes shows us that the ancient Hebrews did not see exactly the same distinction between miracle and magic that we do. Here we see Aaron and Moses on the right, and a group of magicians opposite them on the left. Aaron has been directed by God to throw down his rod, which then turns into a serpent. In response, the Pharaoh calls in his own sorcerers who are able to do the same. However, Aaron's serpent then swallows the new ones, presumably showing that the Hebrew God has more power and thus must be the true God. As modern people hearing this story, though, we have to wonder, wait a minute, why are Pharaoh's sorcerers able to perform magic at all? The answer is probably that in that ancient culture, belief in magic was so ingrained that no one would have questioned it. In this world, magicians could perform acts contrary to nature, either because of secret knowledge or because they serve a different, lesser God. In fact, the existence of an alternative source of supernatural power is almost necessary in the context of this story. Yes, the first of the 10 commandments says, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me." But some theologians would argue that this commandment does not actually deny the existence or power of other, weaker, non-Hebrew gods who might be the source of magic. This may be why the witch of Endor, the one female example in the Old Testament, is able to call forth the spirit of Samuel from the dead at the request of King Saul, who is worried about an upcoming battle with the Philistines and has not gotten the information he desires from God. Even though Exodus 22:18 had commanded, "Do not allow a sorceress to live," and notice here that the reference is female, that this witch either had a real source of power or has been permitted to call forth Samuel because it suited the Hebrew God's purpose. But in either case, as you can see from this medieval depiction, there is again no hint that she is recognizable as a witch from her appearance. She is simply an ordinary woman engaging in an illegal profession. The New Testament story of the Magi using the stars to find the Christ child is perhaps a little less puzzling. They may practice astrology in a magical sense, but they may also simply be wise men who knew what was then considered to be the science of how stars influence human life. Simon Magus in the New Testament book of Acts, however, is clearly said to have bewitched the people of Samaria. Having seen the apostles performing greater miracles than his through the laying on of hands, he offers money to acquire the power of the Holy Ghost. This story, by the way, is the source of the word simony, used to refer to the crime of purchasing church influence or benefits, a term that is still in use today. Simon is rebuked for attempting to buy spiritual power, of course, and that is the end of the story in the officially accepted books of the New Testament. But in the apocryphal book of the Acts of Peter, that is, a book that was widely circulated but not considered an authentic part of the Bible, he is later reported to have been levitating over the Roman Forum. And he falls to his death when Peter prays to God to stop his demonstrations of magical power. In biblical times, then, there is certainly no claim that magic does not exist. Supernatural events achieved through faith in the Hebrew God are miracles, and everything else is labeled as sorcery, a point which will feed into the very real fear of witches in later centuries. Now, with all this in mind, you may imagine that belief in magic and witches would become rampant in the Middle Ages, since people tend to think of the Middle Ages as a step backward culturally. This must be where the pointy hats and broomsticks turn up. But no. In fact, important scholars and theologians between 800 and 1250 defended the power of reason and the growing interest in the scientific method, arguing that much of what was considered magic was simply poorly understood science, trickery, or error, even what we might perceive as harmless fairy tales. And here we see a picture from a botanical from a slightly later period, a kind of book that had the status of science, part of the so-called natural magic of plants, stones, alchemy, and so on, practiced by monks and scholars. The character in the middle, you probably would first think of as some kind of witch, but actually this is the demon who is repelled by these particular herbs. On the other hand, because of the continuing influence of pre-Christian religions in Europe, especially among the uneducated, there were certainly ordinary people who claimed to be able to perform cures, predict the future, or bewitch their enemies. And many of these self-proclaimed sorcerers were unmarried women, partly because they were genuinely familiar with the use of medicinal herbs, and partly because their relative powerlessness as females sometimes led to antisocial behaviors, like claiming or wishing that they could put a curse on someone. Here we begin to get a sense of the isolated hag, who generates fear and mistrust. But in part because a connection to nature was popular among ordinary people, and in part because these were women who were considered morally and intellectually weaker than men, they were not taken very seriously. In the Decretum of Burchard of Worms in the early 1000s, for example, the maximum penalty for attempting to conjure illness, looking for signs under stones, or even believing that women met at night to eat the flesh of Christians, was only 2 years of penance. Although the attitudes towards women are very negative, it would seem that early Europe had made some progress towards reason, moderation, and even sociological awareness. Witches were not tortured and burned, and their very existence was considered doubtful. So what went wrong? In a single word, the problem was the concept of heresy. Quite apart from beliefs in witchcraft, unapproved variations in Christian belief began to create increasing conflict from the 12th century forward, leading to the desire to exterminate the offenders, as in the burning of 80 pre-Protestant Waldensians in 1211 and over 200 Cathars in 1245. This slide shows how the Pope even organized a crusade against the dualistic heresy of the Cathars, who lived in what is now southern France. How this concept of heresy worked is illustrated by a surprising example, that of the French heroine, Joan of Arc, who was burned as a witch in 1431. The English and Burgundians who arrested her simply wanted her dead because she had turned the tide of the 100 Years' War. But the actual charge against her was heresy, based on her claim that she heard voices telling her what to do. Again, a look at her image does not show what we would think of as a witch. But this is because we do not see what the people of her time saw. One of her major crimes was the wearing of male clothing, a heresy because Deuteronomy 22:5 said women should not wear that which pertaineth unto a man. The judge determined that the devil was the source of the voices she followed, and the devil had persuaded her to dress like a man, and therefore she was a witch and must die. It is possible even still that cases like this would have remained rare had it not been for one thing: the introduction of the printing press, less than 10 years later in 1440. In the growing struggle for religious power, rumors and descriptions of ritual witchcraft had proliferated, and these now could be broadly disseminated in printed form, most famously in the treatise called the Malleus Maleficarum, the Hammer of Witches, published by the Dominican theologian and inquisitor Heinrich Kramer in 1486. This one book went into 15 printings before 1520, and another 19 printings between 1569 and 1669, the most intense period of witch hunting in Europe. Kramer argued that belief in witchcraft was essential to the Catholic faith, and that witches, almost always women, susceptible to error because of being feeble in mind and body, caused real harm. Based on a 1435 description of the witches' Sabbath, more detailed stories followed. Stories of women flying on broomsticks to midnight meetings, mixing powders, herbs, and ointments to poison their enemies. So this is where the scary part really begins. More publications appeared from Calvinists, Jesuits, English Protestants, and others. With the appearance of the first witch trial pamphlets in 1579, and broadsides selling for only a penny, the tabloids of the era, one has the equivalent of today's internet. Scandalous accounts of witchcraft trials illustrated by woodcut prints spread the images not only of old hags on broomsticks, an innovation that explained how these poor women could attend midnight meetings without anyone seeing them walking the roads, but also images of lonely widows and spinsters who kept cats or other strange animals as familiars, that is, pet demons. And here you see giant toads, and also the ageist image of a woman with a big nose, which emphasizes her ugliness. Pamphlets showed groups of women huddling around boiling cauldrons, and yes, finally, those pointy hats, which might have had various sources, but certainly served as a kind of anti-Semitic dog whistle to remind Christians of those other heretics, the supposedly Satan-worshiping Jews who had been required to wear conical hats since the Fourth Lateran Council of 1215. Woodcuts were expensive to create, but cheap to reproduce. So the economics of the technology led towards reinforcement of the same images over and over again. As one historian points out, it all looks rather exciting. But what we are left with is a period of history when there were probably tens of thousands of executions, an illustration of the danger of mixing religious fervor, prejudice, sensational stories, and an unbridled new communication technology in unsettled times. Today, saying a woman is bewitching can sometimes sound charming, but we still have dangerous stereotypes and sensationalism. In this picture of Meghan Markle, there is no pointy hat, and she is certainly not an ugly crone. But does her dark hair or even her race have meaning here? What does this headline say about female power? What is there about her that people, or men, are afraid of? Perhaps as we go into Halloween, all those pointy hats and broomsticks we see can serve as a useful reminder to be on our guard against fear and stereotypes, and to watch out for what we read on the internet, a technology that often incites people to destroy other people's lives. As we move into the discussions after the service, you may want to think about what you mean when you use the word witch. And what images has the internet put into your head that you might want to question more critically? Thank you.
Witzelburg verhieß der Trupp, der tanzenden Gaben auf Gaben. Sie sollen schönen Seligen und Tiefe wo Gutes sie graben. Sie sollen schönen Seidigen und so wie wo Gutes sie graben. Feuerdrack und fliegendes Dack und Brigids und Motoren neuer. Die Nachbarn tanzen, die Vögel wenn und schlagen ein Kreuz in dem Feuer. Die Schlaubi fliegt, der Frühling sieht, die Blumen auf Blumen zum Kranz. Bautauschen will es aus der Tour, Bautauschen will es aus der Tour. Jung Hase so prächtigen Tanze. Bautauschen will es aus der Tour, Bautauschen will es aus der Tour. Jung Hase so prächtigen Tanze.
Wow, what a treat to get to see Michaela sing this morning. I have chills. I hope that you do too. First UU is a church that matters. It is in the foundation of our being to love, to care, and to be generous. We know this world is a long way from being fair to all people. It takes all of us to make it better. To offer our gifts and pay our promised pledges is to say to ourselves and the world that we are defined by our hearts and our deeper values. Our Share the Plate recipient for October is Friends of the Lower Olentangy Watershed. FLOW's mission is to keep the Olentangy River and its tributaries clean and safe for all to enjoy through public education, volunteer activities, and coordination with local decision makers. FLOW partnered with First UU to build a small rain garden by our memorial garden and the larger one near our church entrance off Weisheimer. These were some of the first rain gardens in Columbus and are a great example of First UU leading the way on environmental issues. The offering that helps build a better world and a better church will now be gratefully received. You can donate online on our website, text to give, bank by mail, or write a check and mail it in. Thank you for your generosity.
Thank you, Nathan. We open our caring meditation today with words by Reverend Teresa Soto from the wonderful little book, Spilling the Light. This is called Mitochondrial Gift. Our history is always with us. Across organisms, offspring receive a maternal inheritance, DNA, strands of instructions twisted together and reaching into the future. What is the secret tucked into the folds of tiny parts of cells? How does that legacy keep us alive? We are each and all holding a gift of humanity, fragile, wrapped in tissue. We are connected by those gifts generation after generation, failure after new attempt, dream upon dream, creation from disaster. I know you're just not sure about your place, about this time, about what, if anything, is possible. Just try to remember that people have built splendid new futures from much less than the magic and the bequest of life that you now hold. The world is waiting for your gifts and invitation. Do not blame yourself for being wonderful. There is no shame in this. You must instead expand and understanding the destiny of your inheritance, the here, the now, the you must fly. Our carrying cards this week are both marking joyous moments. We send congratulations to Reverend Susan and John M., who celebrated their 35th wedding anniversary on October 12th. Congratulations. And happy birthday to Marguerite M. She is celebrating her 94th birthday today. Happy birthday. We also received these joys in the chat box. Mary Lou M says happy birthday to Dave M today. Amy and Tom are overjoyed at how well their online wedding from First UU went on Monday. It was from a nearly empty church out to 50 virtual guests in about 8 states. Congratulations. And Brad B shares a joy that their 12-year-old dog Briggs is okay after a stroke and he doesn't have a brain tumor. But Brad and his family are still feeling sorrow that their 1-year-old cat Phoebe is still sick. We have these other sorrows this morning. Julie S. is asking for caring thoughts for an old college friend who's suffering a very bad case of COVID. And last weekend, Will W. was hospitalized with severe gallbladder pain. He has returned home with Cindy and Josh while awaiting test results and entering the world of better diet and urology. We'll be thinking of you. So we carry these joys and sorrows of our community and our destiny to be fully ourselves and be fully great in that. As we move into silence with the sound of the bell. I now invite you to sing How Sweet the Darkness.
Thought you might enjoy seeing just a couple more images before we close. This one is from the book, The Discovery of Witches. And the man in the back, Matthew Hopkins, is a real person who had the official position of Witchfinder General under the government during the English Civil War. The woman on the right was named Elizabeth Clark. And what she is saying is, my imp's names are. And you can see that the fact that she is naming these animals, some perfectly normal and others very strange, is part of what he is going to prosecute. The second image is simply an image of a cat in medieval Renaissance times. And cats were not house pets as often during this period. They were usually mousers and they lived in barns or outside. But the thing I think is interesting here is it's not the cat from the children's story, but there are some really incredible scratches underneath that cat's claws. So now for our closing words. Halloween is a good time for us to remember that we can be easily swayed by society's judgments on people who make us uncomfortable. Let us work towards a better understanding of those who frighten us and be brave when we need to challenge old ideas with something new.
Guide us, peace has tried us, hope
As a symbol of our connection and shared vision as a congregation, I invite you to place your hands over your heart or virtually hold hands as we say our closing words together. The words will be in the chat box if you do not yet know them by heart. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of vision. As we go forth, let us heal and transform ourselves and our world through reason and love.
Thank you, Don. As I mentioned at the beginning of the service, the First UU board will host a town hall in a few minutes following this service. There will be announcements and a big question topic for discussion. What will you and your loved ones need in order to feel safe returning to our building together? I also, if you have not already been attending, I would highly recommend that you join us Monday evenings from 7 to 8:15 p.m. for our Conversations on Race group. Right now, we are working our way through the Unitarian Universalist Commission on Institutional Changes report. This report took a long and detailed look at how we as Unitarian Universalists can do better to fight racism, injustice, and inequality in our congregations and in Unitarian Universalism as a whole. This is a critically important and challenging report that invites us to do the difficult work in order to truly become a welcoming and inclusive faith community. Also, next week on Sunday, November 1st, we will have our annual remembrance service. Please send photos of loved ones you have lost in the last year and their names to Rev Marion by Friday at noon. And finally, if you are considering joining the church, our next Pathways class is also next week. You can register at firstuucolumbus.org/pathways.
And just another reminder that during our coffee hour, we are doing our town hall and you don't want to miss it. In addition to our good discussion question, we're going to have an extra special announcement. Got to be there to know what it is. So after we finish here, grab your coffee, tea, or water and head back into Zoom. It's the same link that we usually use for coffee hour. And a reminder that the passcode is lowercase uu. It'll go live in a few minutes once all of us, your worship leaders, relocate virtually.
Special thanks to everyone who made today's worship service possible. Thank you to John Jones, the Vice Chair of our Board of Trustees, for today's chalice lighting and closing words. And a very special thank you to our guest speaker this morning, Kristen Figg. Thank you to our musicians, including special music from Michaela Jones-Brown, our Spirit of Life Choir Director. And thanks also to Brandon Moss, our Director of Music and Chalice Choir Director, and Nathan Ham, our pianist. Thank you to our ministry team, including myself, Kelly McNeil, our Director of Congregational Life, Isabel Call, our Assistant Minister of Pastoral Care, and our Senior Minister, Reverend Dr. Marion Stewart.
Thank you so much, Nathan. Everyone's invited to the town hall starting in a few minutes. You will see a link to the Zoom meeting on the next slide. I look forward to seeing everyone there. I hope you have a great day.